So, hello, this is a presentation about the Sandymoor Parish Council Have Your Say Survey 2021, which is being presented by myself, Tom Willett, and John Secker, who's here with me. Hi, John.
Thank you very much. Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. I'll be sitting in the background, mostly jumping in every now and then to make a few comments, but this is mostly Tom's survey and mostly Tom's presentation.
Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, John. To introduce the survey, which this presentation is about, this survey is a survey of resident views on local issues, which was carried out by Sandymoor Parish Council in order to find out residents' views on local issues. It was created in Google Forms and shared via the Living in Sandymoor and Love Sandymoor Facebook groups, because a lot of residents are on these Facebook groups, so it was an efficient way to distribute the survey. All of the tools that we used were free, which means that the survey was carried out at no cost to the residents of Sandymoor. And this survey resulted in generating a spreadsheet containing raw data, which I hope that, subject to Parish Council approval at future Parish Council meetings, we hopefully will be able to make available to the public, so that other people will be able to analyse and other residents will be able to analyse the data that's been generated and possibly draw their own conclusions, which might be different. But in this present presentation, I will be showing my own analysis of that data here. And just a warning, or maybe an advert, it's going to contain a lot of graphs. So if you enjoy looking at graphs, you might enjoy looking at this survey, looking at this presentation. And here, just a note, which I've been requested to stress by members of the Parish Council. The Parish Council does not have powers to address all local issues. So there might be some issues that are raised by the survey that the Parish Council can identify from the survey, but then we won't actually have the powers necessarily to deal with those issues. In some cases, it's just information that we've generated from this survey.
It's worth saying, Tom, on that point, that while we may not have the power to directly do something, we do as a parish council have the ability and indeed the role to influence other bodies, so that we can say, as the parish council, here are the things that our residents want you to do for them. And I think that's actually a very important outcome from this survey.
Yes. And as John's suggested there are quite a lot of things in the survey that are very strong recommendations of what residents would like for public bodies to do for them. So first, how did we create useful, relevant survey questions for the survey? We use a rating scale format for most questions, as shown in this example here. So for this question, you can see there is a question, and then you have the choice of rating that from 1 to 5 in terms of how important you think that particular issue is. So if you thought it was very important, rated it as a 5, think it's completely unimportant, rated as a 1, and or any of the numbers in between, depending on what you think. The survey topics, in order to actually generate the survey questions, myself and John went on local walkarounds of Sandymoor, bumped into residents, asked them their thoughts on local issues, and knocked on doors in order to ask residents their thoughts on local issues. In this part of the survey, we asked a total of 27 residents for their thoughts, and we asked them questions like, what do you like most about Sandymoor, and what would you like to see kept the same in Sandymoor? From that generated certain themes that some which were particularly common in the responses that residents gave. For example, themes such as rural nature, the greenery, the scenery, the woods around Sandymoor kept coming up. So we could see that this kind of theme was a very important one to address in the rest of the survey. And similarly, what gives you most cause for concern about Sandymoor? Residents were concerned particularly about residential buildings and developments. And like I say, we didn't ask them if they were concerned about residential buildings or developments. This was just a theme that residents, when asked face to face, repeatedly brought up as an issue. So based on the feedback we got from these local walkarounds, which, like I say, we just asked 27 residents in total, these themes arose, and then we were able to generate a list of questions and answers for those questions for the parish council. I should also add at this point, I didn't put in the point in the presentation, that subsequent to this first walk around, I then went and knocked on a few more doors of people who were near the new residential developments and people who were near the areas that are currently very green in Sandymoor, to ask them what kind of questions they thought should be asked on the survey to get more feedback from the people who are most directly affected by these issues. So those were also fed back to the parish council, and then subsequent to that feedback and this information that I'm showing here, the parish council agreed on a list of questions and a selection of answers for each of those questions, which could go into the survey. So from that, we created the survey and distributed it, as I say, via links posted on the local Facebook groups, and got a really good feedback from the residents. So how many people responded, and also because we asked demographic questions at the beginning of the survey, I'm able to see who it was that responded to the survey. In total, 253 people completed the survey, which I was very pleased by. I wasn't expecting that larger number of people to respond, so I was really glad the number of people that responded. Of those, 237 were Sandymoor residents and 16 live elsewhere. We asked them what their gender was, so we saw that there were about 2/3 of the people who replied were women or girls. And of the areas in Sandymoor that they lived, then we can see that there was a pretty even distribution from different geographic areas of Sandymoor. We'd split them up based on what the main arterial roads going through their residential areas are. And Pittsheath, Walsingham, Newmore Lane and Warford Lane each had a similar number of respondents from them. The age distribution, we asked people what their age was in years, and we got this age distribution, as you can see on the left-hand side. I've shown you also the raw data on which that graph's based on the right-hand side. Comparing that to this graph that I created from data a few years ago, which was just publicly available government data for the general age distribution in Sandymoor, we can see that from the age of 30 upwards, the proportion of people that have responded to the survey is very similar to the proportion of people that live in Sandymoor in the first place. Below the age of 30, fewer people have responded to the survey than you would expect if the response was directly proportional to the number of residents in Sandymoor. So younger ages are underrepresented. Only 2 0 to 9-year-olds and 6 10 to 19-year-olds responded. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the numbers which are above the graph, I should point out, are percentages and not the absolute numbers that responded. But this does mean that possibly if we want in the future to get some information about what younger people in Sandymoor think, we can't necessarily use this survey to understand their thoughts, the thoughts of the youngest people in Sandymoor. How did we analyse the responses we got from this survey? I started by doing the most obvious thing, I think, which was comparing the average scores given by all the respondents for each answer. So that was just taking where the answers came in the form of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, least interested 1, most interested 5, or then that number that was generated by the survey could then be used as, can then be added up for all of the results that we got across all of the respondents to give an average score. But as you can see here, visually, there isn't that much difference if you use an average score. So it maybe makes it a bit more difficult to interpret the results. But an alternative I came up with is to analyse the results by the proportion of respondents who gave a score of 5 to that answer. So unfortunately, this does mean in the processing, we haven't included any of the results from people who scored 1 to 4 on a particular issue. But we can also see that when I've compared the average results to the number that gave 5, then it's almost a perfect correlation between those that got a higher average score and those that scored a 5. So here you can see it's easier to differentiate which people thought were the most important issues here and the least important issues, because the least important issues have a significantly smaller bar.
Tom, just to elaborate and comment on that, I think what you've done there is a valid analysis, because what you're saying there is these are the people who thought those particular issues were of top importance. So they hadn't just been given the issue and thought, oh yeah, maybe I'll give that a 2 or a 3, because everything is worth improving. These are the ones where people had really strong feelings.
Yes. So it is, as John said, I think the reason I've used it is it's a valid approach to analysing it. At the same time, there are other alternative approaches that can be used, and every approach has its strengths and weaknesses. So as I said earlier, subject to parish council approval, if we're able to share the survey data, the raw data with people, then they would also be able to do their own analysis. And if they find something different, then they can share that, or they can use that. I also tried analysing the results and giving more information depending on the gender of the people who responded. But I did find that there actually wasn't very much of a difference when you split them up by gender. There were differences when they were split up by age, but actually it gave really difficult graphs to analyse. So on the right-hand side, you can see it bounces around all over the place. So for the purpose of this presentation, it's just too complicated to analyse it by age. So yeah, for most of the analysis shown here, I've ignored those 2 factors, gender and age. So on to what you're probably more interested in, and I'm sorry if I've bored you until this point. What were the survey results? I've started with those relating to Sandymoor South because based on the feedback we got initially about green spaces and new developments, this repeatedly seemed to be the most important issue and the one that people were most concerned about in Sandymoor at the moment.
Just maybe for not everybody will recognise Sandymoor South is the proposed new development south of the existing Walsum Drive developments.
Yes, that's correct. And so the question here was, how important is it to you to see the following outdoor features in the upcoming Sandymoor South development? The list of options on the left-hand side, you can see it on the left-hand side. The issues that people seem to find the most important were those which related to walking routes around Sandymoor South. And then if we include trees and swans in it, I think there is a bit of a pattern of people being able to walk around the Sandymoor South area as they do at the moment, and be able to take in nature and to see trees, to see wildlife of different types while they're walking around Sandymoor South. The issues lower down on the graph, which were less popular, they are ones that don't relate to walking around and don't relate to nature as much. So that seems to be an important theme there. How important is it to you to see the following built features in Sandymoor South? The most popular answer was a medical centre or GP. This specifically has been pointed out by members of the parish council is not something that that Sandymoor Parish Council can directly affect. It's a matter that is controlled, I think, by the NHS based upon specific calculations relating to population sizes and ages and other things like that. But it's been noted that this was the most popular result. Beyond that, a cafe or pub overlooking the canal which I'm pleased to see people were a fan of, because I think I suggested that, and more local shops in the local area. I don't know how this might change when the local shops are completed next to Otterburn Street in the northern part of Sandymoor, but it's maybe not surprising that as Sandymoor currently doesn't have any shops, that people would be keen to see that in different parts of Sandymoor. How concerned are you about the following issues relating to new developments in and around Sandymoor? The size and appearance of new buildings was seen as being the biggest issue. I think possibly I was a little bit surprised that this came top and then green space disappearing came third, because green space disappearing had been seen as like the bigger issue when we talked to people during the walkarounds, I think. But new developments in and around Sandymoor, I should point out, although it's not shown on this graph, that quite a lot of people fed back negatively about the very large building that has been developed as part of the new development just off the ride, which that got name checked quite a lot by people when we were doing the walkarounds. So possibly that's influenced this response as well. And lack of amenities in the new development, that completely matches with what we saw about people hoping that there would be shops in Sandymoor South, and people awaiting the local centre just off Otterburn Street. I should actually probably point out at the same time as well that, as well as looking at the results that come at the top of the graph, it's probably also quite worthwhile looking at the results that come at the bottom of the graph, because in the future, in terms of the parish council actions, John, I think you might agree that this kind of information, and I'll just mention it later as well, will help us to decide where we focus our efforts, and also the implication of that as well as where we might not focus our efforts, in terms of like where we would spend a larger proportion of our parish council time looking and addressing certain issues, things like increased resident traffic. If fewer people have cited that as an important concern, so it may be that some decisions might be taken, like which account for the fact that people consider the size and appearance of new buildings much more important than increased resident traffic, which could be a controversial thing to say, but based on this data, that is just how I would interpret the data.
Yes, indeed. I think there's two thoughts I have on that. One is that the ones lower down, although they can be extremely annoying for certain individuals, especially if they're close to the site, they are temporary. So construction noise, construction traffic, and so on will pass, whereas large new buildings, for example, will be there virtually forever. But yes, this is one of the useful things about this survey. It will allow us as a parish council to understand which are the things which in general most people feel strongly about. There is a risk that we will be driven by one or two individuals making noisy protests about a particular item, whereas in fact something different is what really upsets a majority of the residents. So very useful data for us.
Yes, it is very useful data, and like you say, it does mean that where maybe not a silent majority, but where a more quiet and sedate large number of people actually do find something very important, then this does give that kind of feedback, and it might prevent us from, hopefully would prevent us in the future from being swayed by people who, like individuals who have very strong opinions about a particular issue that is maybe of a lower concern to the majority of the population. So other questions relating to developments. These are a few ones that were dotted around the survey. This one I should mention here. It was just my own personal question, because I was very interested in the land usage associated with building taller buildings or shorter buildings. I would say I personally am in favour of taller buildings being built using up a smaller footprint on the land to leave more green space between buildings. But I can see from this, and this is part of the reason why I personally was interested in asking this question, I can see that is not what the majority of people in Sandymoor feel. The majority of people in Sandymoor feel that they would prefer to see shorter buildings built, wider built, which would then imply they're going to be wider buildings that take up more, a larger footprint with less green space left between them. And that's more popular by over 2/3 to 1/3 of the residents saying that. Have residents seen the Sandymoor supplementary planning document? Over half of them have seen that. And the reason this was asked was that this is a document, or the reason I would ask it is that it's a document that gives you maps and it details the existing plans for Sandymoor in terms of the areas that are expected to be built on and the areas that what you might expect to see in the different areas. It's not followed to the letter by proposed developers and their proposed developments, but it does give you, from a resident's point of view, a good indication of where you might expect things to be built. So it's really useful information for residents. And have you ever visited the Sandymoor Parish Council website? This isn't directly related to development, but this is the only place I could find to put this graph in, really. Apparently, over half of residents have visited the Sandymoor Parish Council website. As a separate note, we are looking possibly at doing some workers in our communication group in Sandymoor Parish Council to see if there are any improvements we can make to the Parish Council website. But beyond that, this presentation probably isn't the place to mention any more about that. How concerned are you regarding the following traffic issues in Sandymoor? By far the most troubling issue to residents of Sandymoor seems to be vehicles speeding through Sandymoor, which that's very useful information for us, because this means that we understand that we can be giving more feedback relating to vehicle speeding and see if there are any opportunities for us to reduce the amount of vehicle speeding that goes through Sandymoor. Would you like or dislike the following changes or additions to be made to Sandymoor Village Green? The two most popular things here were wildflower areas and more trees, which again, that to me, this fits with the general theme of the responses, that people like the natural and green environment of Sandymoor. They would like to see wild flowers on the village green in certain areas. They'd like to see more trees there. At the opposite end, suggestions such as street snooker area, I think it won't be controversial looking at how small that bar is to say that really was not a popular choice. And the things that are at the bottom of this particular graph, the bars are so much smaller that it really suggests to me that in general, people are not very keen on the idea of building things on Sandymoor Village Green. Sandymoor Village Green currently is a green area. It's a expanse of grass, and it seems that people would like either for it to be kept something like that, or to have things, if anything is added to it, that it would be other natural features which only serve to emphasize the greenery that we've already got there. I've got an extra graph here. However, because looking into the data, the one distinct thing I saw when looking at the differences between ages and how they responded is that respondents aged 10 to 19 felt very differently. And it probably won't surprise people to see that the suggestion of exercise climbing equipment for teenagers was particularly popular among a group that involved lots of teenagers. So also a basketball court was very popular with people in that age group. So that's an extra detail to consider. But like I said also earlier, the number of people in this age group that responded was smaller than it was, say, people over the age of 30. So possibly this would suggest that it might be worth doing more to find out the opinions of people in their teens and primary school age kids as well. Yeah, unsurprisingly, they would like things for teenagers. How important is it to improve bus connections between Sandymoor and the following destinations? The improvement to bus connections, this was raised not actually by local residents as much. This was actually something just where I had a brief discussion with some local councillors from Halton Borough Council. Then they were also wondering about bus connections. And so it seems that people are actually more concerned about bus connections to areas within Warrington than they are other areas within Halton. Which again, this does tie in with some comments that I've heard people say previously, where they do currently, the residents of Sandymoor, and many of them do feel more connected to Warrington than they do to Halton, which again might be a controversial opinion to state, but yeah, this does agree with that observation that people have made to me before. How important is it to improve walking routes between Sandymoor and the following destinations? Once again, there seemed to be a bit of a pattern of people feeling it's more important to be connected to things in the Warrington direction than it is things in the Halton direction. Although at the same time, I should point this, actually, I think this result is quite practical as well, because in terms of being able to walk from Sandymoor to Windmill Hill and Murdershaw, you can do it very easily at the moment. It might not be ideal in terms of walking at night, like the amount of light, the quality of the lighting on the path, or the actual quality of the footpath. But I would say, like personally, I find it much easier to walk to Windmill Hill or Murdershaw than I would find it to walk over to Daresbury. That's going to be very difficult to walk, particularly at night. So I think that makes perfect sense that people would like walking routes improved, and particularly with additional developments going on in Daresbury. How interested would you be in attending the following social activities in Sandymoor? Excuse me. So the most popular activity was live music, followed by quizzes. We have seen plenty of quizzes being held in Sandymoor in the past, but live music based on this seems like something that the public would be very interested in being available to them. Craft and art fairs also put that on there, and yeah, that was very popular. I would say I don't think I'm showing a breakdown, am I? I am showing the breakdown by gender as well. And one thing I've noticed there is that craft and art fairs were very popular with women and girls, not so popular with men and boys. Maybe that's not a surprising result, but if anyone was looking at this and then thinking they should start up a craft or art fair, in terms of take up, yeah, you're probably going to get more take up if you design that to be appealing to women and girls. And similarly, if anyone saw this looking to start up a tennis club, relatively, it looks like that option is kind of a bit more popular with men and boys. So once again, if anyone looks at this and thinks they might be interested in starting up one of these activities, then I think that gender breakdown is quite useful. And then at the end of the survey, we had a question which was more open-ended. It said, do you have any other comments or thoughts regarding Sandymoor's future? And if so, please write them below. So in order to analyze this, obviously this gives us lots of sentences and paragraphs that we can read through, but that on its own is not very conducive to a summary or something we can graph and show you at the moment. But a way we can analyze it was by looking at what the most common topics that were mentioned in the comments were, and summarizing this by the frequency of words and phrases that we used, which also, that's a really quick way to process it. So I took the entirety of all of the text that everyone had entered into the comment section and entered this into a website called monkeylearn.com. I should point out, since I've written it here, I'm not affiliated with monkeylearn.com at all. I just Googled it, and I think it was maybe not the top result, but maybe the second result that came up for looking at word frequency. And these were the results that we saw, the most commonly mentioned words. The top two were area and Sandymoor. So these don't actually mean very much, because obviously area could apply to anything. Sandymoor it's a survey about Sandymoor, so that doesn't give us any useful information. But when I've gone through and removed words like that from the list, then these are the most commonly mentioned issues within the comment section. Again, development, green space, and traffic, all things that we've already addressed within the survey. Number 4 was primary school. And I guess out of the things that we asked about in the survey, this is the most common issue in the comments that we didn't address at all in the survey. 10 people had written something about primary school. So that also appears to be something that would be worth us looking into or finding out about in the future. Obviously, the parish council are not in the position themselves to open up a primary school. The comments and responses might be biased by the question topics we asked in the survey, and I mention that because as this comment section was at the end of the survey, it's been preceded by a full list of questions about Sandymoor. So that's put people in a certain mindset in which they might be then more prone to give comments about the issues that have already been discussed in the survey, rather than just bringing up ones out of the blue which weren't already covered in the survey. So it's got that kind of bias within it.
Tom, that's true, but it also, this is evidence that the topics that you chose for the survey and the questions were the ones that were most on people's minds. If they'd come up with a big vote for something that we hadn't mentioned, that might mean we missed something. But this does say to me that the questions that we asked did match quite well with the hot topics that people were thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one. Yes, that's again a valid way to look at it. But yeah, I hope that's the case. And however, yeah, primary school was mentioned 10 times, even though it wasn't mentioned in any of our survey questions. So then, in summary, the residents were clearly keen to have their say about local issues. As I said, there were 253 responses to the survey. 237 were from people who lived in Sandymoor, and it's very likely that most of the other people who replied live very near to Sandymoor. The Sandymoor's main appeal is that of being very green and having lots of nice natural things around, and this was reflected in the survey results. Residents are concerned about new developments, loss of green space, unsuitable buildings, and inadequate amenities in particular. The survey results that we found here will form part of SPC discussions, for example, with developers, with Halton Borough Council, and with other bodies like that. But some of the issues raised are ones that the parish council does not have the influence or power to do much about. We can, as John has mentioned, still raise the issues which we don't have the actual powers to deal with to bodies that we think would be relevant for dealing with the issue. But some of these things will be outside of our actual power to make any real decisions about. So what I would suggest should be the use of this survey is to help us focus on the issues that we can influence, and to look to prioritize those which the survey shows are most important. And this is the final slide, I think. I made this a few weeks ago, so hopefully I can remember. Thanks to everybody who contributed to the survey design stage, all of the residents who I interrupted on their walks or annoyed by knocking on their doors in the morning. Everybody who filled in the survey, thank you for taking your time to go through and fill in the survey. Your data is really useful. The rest of the parish council for looking through all the survey proposals that John and I had, and for helping us out with other points, things we could mention, and other issues. And of course, you for watching, everyone who's watching, thank you for taking your time to listen to this, and I hope that you found it very useful and informative. Thank you from me.
Can I just jump in at this point and thank one more person, of course, is you, Tom. Although I and other members of the parish council have all contributed to this and done our bit, there's no doubt that Tom has put in a great deal of time and thought and effort in making this survey effective, and then carrying it out and then doing the analysis. So I'd like to extend my thanks to you, Tom.
Oh, well, thank you very much, John. Thank you. And I'd like you to thank you for both doing this presentation with me and also all of the feedback and all the help you've given during the course of the survey. So thank you very much. And I'm going to stop the recording now.